Hello, welcome back to my viewers. Wonderful to have you here again today. Before I begin this actual video, I just want to remind everyone about our Australian Noahide conference, Asia Pacific conference, that will be conducted in 2023, February 4th to the 9th in Melbourne. There will be links in the description box below and also a previous video regarding the conference. And so just a gentle reminder that registrations are going to close on the 26th of November. So not too many days left for you to get that registration in, but as I said, there will be a link in the description box below, an email, etc., where you can send your expressions of interest, etc. Right, now on to today's video. Well, I think the 23rd Psalm is probably one of the most well-known and frequently quoted or used psalms known thus far to mankind. Most Judeo-Christian faiths use this psalm frequently for various times and reasons, and I would hasten to say that I think it is probably a much loved psalm by everyone. If in doubt, use the 23rd Psalm. But I wonder how many of you know really what it means. And for some time I've been going to do a video on the 23rd Psalm, and I always put it off and something else crops up, and you know how things go. So I made it a point that no, the time is right to look a little closer into Psalm 23. Now, I will give you also reference links in the description box below where you can access and read it online. And I am using the writings of the Art Scrolls series. So what I have here in front of me is the Book of Psalms, and it is written in Hebrew, its original text, etc. there, and English. And for obvious reasons, I will read the English translation. But just to give you a sort of an idea, here we go. I think you might be able to see that. So you can see where the 23rd Psalm is, and you can see that there is explanation in English and also Hebrew. The psalm can be read in Hebrew or also in English if you so desire. So, having said all that, let's now concentrate on the psalm. Now, look, I will just read it out to you first, and then we will go through it certainly verse by verse and get a broader understanding of this very well-known psalm. So let's start. Psalm 23, there's only 6 verses, remember. A psalm by David. Hashem is my shepherd, I shall not lack. In lush meadows he lays me down, beside tranquil waters he leads me. He restores my soul, he leads me on paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley overshadowed by death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table for me in view of my tormentors. You anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. My cup overflows, I beg your pardon. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Hashem for long days. Okay, so that's just the 6 verses, very small psalm. So let's get into this now and just see what it says. Well, the general introduction, and I am relying on text reference here because I think it keeps it more succinct and accurate. But the introduction commentary says, David composed this famed psalm during one of the most dangerous and discouraging periods of his life. He was a forlorn fugitive fleeing from King Saul and his army. In desperation, David hid in a barren, desolate area called the Forest of Hereth. And the reference to that is 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 5. So named because it was parched and dry like baked earthenware. But God did not forsake him. God soaked the dry forest with moisture that had the flavour of the world to come, making even the grass and the leaves of the forest succulent and edible. This showed David that God supports and nourishes at all times, even when a person's chances of survival seem to be non-existent. You know that old saying, darkest, always darkest before the storm, and then it's quickly gone. The psalmist does not confine his inspiration to himself. He utilises it to sing on behalf of all of Israel, recalling how God provided for the entire nation throughout its 40-year sojourn in the wilderness. It is the customs of some communities to recite this psalm during the washing of the hands before a meal. Now, the psalm contains 57 words, and when you stop and think about it, it is a short psalm, isn't it? So we go on. Now the Arizal concludes that those who recite this psalm and live by its message will always be blessed with ample provisions. Now we'll go right into the psalm now. Verse 1, we'll start with that. It says, now when we go into it, the explanation says, my shepherd. This term describes God as the supreme provider of all human needs. It renders it, he provided all of his nation's needs in the wilderness. We know about that. Goes on and says, I shall not lack. David compared himself to sheep that have no reason to care for their own welfare because they know that their shepherd, which means God, will provide for all their needs. David dedicated this psalm to those servants of God who forsake all worldly desires and rejoice in their own lot, whatever it may be. They appreciate their simple bread and water more than all the delicacies of the world, for their attention is focused on the spiritual pleasures of the world to come. Now, I shall lack nothing. It describes God's boundless generosity towards the Israelites in the wilderness. Normally, travel wears out your clothing, exhausts the body, and forces one to skimp on food. However, Israel lacked nothing. Remember the manna from heaven? So let's look now at verse 2. And verse 2 goes on and says in description, in lush meadows. Now David continues his comparison of God to a shepherd, likening him to one who seeks out choice pastures for his flock. Now, then we have tranquil waters, that phrase. Now, the waters of a tranquil stream are always clear and sweet, whereas those of a torrential river are turgid and muddy. It's messy. You wouldn't want to take a sip of that water. The next phrase is, he leads me. Now, David teaches us how to make the best of even the most uncomfortable situations. Sometimes a person yearns to move on, to travel, or to change paths, but his attempts are frustrated and he is tied down to one place. You must realise that this is God's will when this happens. David says you must feel as if this is the very best place on earth for you at this time, and to establish himself securely. But circumstances force him, if he lays me down, I must feel that this place is as if I were in lush meadows. I skipped a sentence there. But circumstances force him to move on, to flee, and he never realises his desire to rest. In other words, to stay for an amount of time in a restful one spot. This too is for my best, says David. Accept it gladly. Thus, if he leads me, i.e. forces me to move on, I must feel as if I am in calm repose beside tranquil waters. So isn't that lovely, the way that's described in verse 2? Let's go on to verse 3. He restores. Now the translation follows Rashi, who explains, my spirit has become faint as a result of great trials and tragedies. But Hashem revives me and restores my vigour. Alternately, it could mean he leads tranquilly, as in with tranquility and calm. And that comes from Isaiah chapter 30, verse 15. God is not inconsiderate of his flock and does not drive it rapidly from one grazing area to another. And back to the shepherd, you wouldn't do that. You let them rest and benefit from what pasture is available and safety. He leads it slowly so that the sheep never become exhausted. He leads me on paths of righteousness. The considerate shepherd herds his sheep on straight paths so they do not stumble. David thus thanks Hashem for directing him away from his enemies. All this is done for his name's sake, to let it be known that he protects those who fear him. Hashem trains the Jewish people to stay straight and not to deviate from the proper path. Now we look at number 4, verse 4. In the valley overshadowed by death. This refers to the exile in general. According to Radak, this describes a place of danger, which is as dark and forbidding as the grave. Rashi maintains that David had a specific place in mind, the wilderness of Ziph, where he was treacherously betrayed and came face to face with the spectre of death at the hands of Saul. And you reference that in 1 Samuel chapter 23, verses 19 to 29. Never in his life was David closer to the grave. For you are with me, meaning my confidence in you is so strong that I know that you will always stand by me in times of need. And you know, that is something we hear so often, and yes, we say it. He's always there. But you know, do we really mean it and believe it? You've got to believe that, not just say it. You have to understand and have faith and believe that he really is there for us. He really does do what is best for us at any given time. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, the rod refers to afflictions, while the staff is God's support. It is the combination of the two that is comforting, because it proves that Hashem pays attention to him to direct him on the right path and balance affliction, which atones with the support needed to tolerate it. I'm going to read that again. The rod refers to afflictions, while the staff is God's support. It is the combination of the two that is comforting, because it proves that Hashem pays attention to him to direct him on the right path and balance affliction, which atones with the support needed to tolerate it. Something to think about, isn't it? Let's turn over here now. And then continuing on toward the end of verse 5, it says, my cup overflows. Now this metaphor means, it describes contentment. You know, oh, my cup runneth over is an old saying, isn't it? It's just, oh, you know, the blessings are abundant. Everything's fine. So, verse, that was, sorry, I've misled you. Verse 5, I beg your pardon. Verse 5 now. You prepare a table for me in view of my tormentors. You have established my kingdom such that even my enemies will be forced to see my glory. This verse was directed at the nations that saw Israel leaving Egypt and were sure that they would perish in the wilderness of hunger and thirst. And they had every reason to think that might happen. They said, is God able to prepare a table in the desert? God then rained down so much manna that it piled up high in the sky for the nations to see. As Israel relaxed and ate, they offered praise to God, fulfilling the verse, you prepare a table for me in view of my tormentors. Now, just stepping back a few lines, there is also reference to this same thing in Psalm 78, verse 19. So just make a note of that. Psalm 78, verse 19. There's a little bit of a link up there, which I will just now read to you. So this is Psalm 23, and back to verse 5 there. Now we're at Psalm 78, verse 19. Psalm 78, verse 19, and I'll read it. And they spoke against God. Psalmist now records the mutinous thoughts that they harboured in their hearts. They said, can God prepare a table in the wilderness? They said, we know that even in the wilderness, God is capable of supplying individual sources of food, such as water and manna. But can he prepare a full table of all types of nourishment? Can he even supply meat? They reasoned, moreover, the manna is not such an extraordinary thing, because solid nutrients also descend from the sky in the form of snow or hailstones. Nor is water from a rock so remarkable, for moisture often condenses and collects under a cool boulder, but meat has never come down from the desert skies. So you can see the link up there, the doubting, and then that they were sort of professing, and to what actually Hashem was able to do for them in the desert. And it continues on here now. I'm back to Psalm 23, verse 5. The end of verse 5 says, you anointed my head with oil. David says, "You chose me as your king, so I am certain that the distress brought me by my enemies will surely end." And he says, "My cup overflows," this metaphor describing contentment. And that ends verse 5. Verse 6, the final verse in Psalm 23, reads, "May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life." Now, simply understood, David prays that he forever be the recipient of goodness and kindness, which is a reasonable thing. However, it can be interpreted as goodness as spiritual self-enrichment and kindness as concern for the spiritual welfare of others, translated into action to teach and elevate them. Thus, David asks that these attributes be so ingrained in his nature that they should relentlessly pursue him to continue those deeds. So see, there's a lot more to Psalm 23, isn't there, than just those 6 verses. That's just, the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? Until you understand the linkage and what's behind it. So, it says the Korfetz Chaim was speaking and quoted this very verse. He expounded, "No man can live out his life in complete tranquility. Everyone is pursued by problems. Often it is serious, as when pursued by enemies, police, bill collectors, or sickness. Fortunate is the man who is pursued by requests to help the poor and Torah institutions." This is what David meant when he said, "May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life." And it finishes, "And I shall dwell in the house of Hashem for long days." Meaning, I shall no longer be a fugitive or a wanderer, nor will I be preoccupied with war or other mundane activities. Therefore, I will be able to spend my time serving God in the house of study and worship. Whew. So doesn't that open up a new vista of how you look at and understand and read Psalm 23? How wonderful it is. There's so much more to that, those simple, as we say, simple 6 verses. And so it's peeling back all those layers and looking into it that, just when you think Psalm 23 couldn't sound any better, now you have a whole new vista of it, don't you? A whole new appreciation, and it has even more meaning. But see how it, little bit here, a little bit there, how it's referenced. Just marvellous, isn't it? Just wonderful. So I just also want to remind you to look in the description box below, where there will be links to what has been read here today, and other links as well. And again, just a gentle reminder that reservations for our conference in Australia will close on the 26th of November. That's just a few days away from publication of this video. So you really need to register if you haven't already done so. And I must say, I'm hoping to see lots of you there. It'll be a wonderful, wonderful experience for us all. In the meantime, please enjoy Psalm 23 with a whole new vigour and heart. And in the meantime, please take care and God bless.